Let's look at the agenda for today. Hey, everyone. Well, I just wanted to go over a couple of things briefly. Hopefully, I'll be able to wrap up because I like to spend a lot of time on these, especially if you've gone back and looked through the archives. If you go to kote.io/Tanzu Talk, you'll see that I spend a lot of delight in going through the videos and putting little interstitial things in. There was a fun one yesterday where I green screened myself looking underneath a lamppost. You should go look for that one. But I try to always put something fun in there, but it does take time, and I'm not complaining. But speaking of prioritizing, I have a couple of, a little pile of things I need to go look over. And I also need to do some primary research for material that I work here. Not so much that I'm running out. I would never admit such a thing. But there's a whole bunch of new things that I want to start incorporating and thinking more on. But anyways, enough talking about the show on the show. Here's the two things I wanted to go over. One is, I was listening to a podcast today. It involves American politics, so I'm not going to refer to it. I'll just say there's a recent episode of the Ezra Klein podcast, it's nice because I guess I said I wasn't going to say anything, but whatever. It's nice because he talks to someone who's kind of outside of his sphere of political thinking, and it's a great conversation. But the idea of technocraticness, anyways, as I haven't read Mark Schwartz's new book about bureaucracy, but the idea of competent bureaucracy comes up. A favorite topic for people who pay attention to American politics at the moment. But it got me thinking about the value of bureaucracy and kind of knowledgeable technocratic work in organizations, as I'll get into. And then I wanted to go over something I was thinking about this morning, which is essentially a phrase that comes up in the podcast world that I listen to a lot. And I'm going to get it wrong, but it's sort of, getting homework for your homework or pets for your pets, kind of unintended burdens that you take on because of things. But equally importantly, analyzing your own reaction to that primary thing based on this principle, if you will. So first, a little bit on leadership stuff. Now, I kind of solidified this topic. Let's see. I like to listen to books online. I'm big into that. And so I often listen to, I'm a big fan, I got to tell you, of oddly enough, I think some of the best things to listen to are like diaries or journals of people. There's one great one that's from what's her name, Tina Brown's sort of 80s diaries when she became the editor of Vanity Fair, and they're really nice to listen to. And I also like things like Joan Didion and other kind of gonzo type of writers, if you will. But I was thinking, I should probably spend some of my time listening to stuff that is of a business nature that kind of fits in the stuff that I was doing. So I was going through and looking at what they have available. And, see if you can find a very common thing in here. Actually, it's not so common here, but when I was looking at it on the, this is much better balanced. But when I was looking at it on my mobile phone, essentially what I was noticing is that a lot of books, in fact, most all of the books that they were showing me were about leadership, right? And of course, I guess there's a category and in here. This is not really helping my case. Thanks a lot, Audible. But if I go to the management and leadership stuff, a lot of it is about leadership types of things and high-level stuff, right? And, I'm going to close this because it doesn't really make my case at all. I should take a screenshot of what it actually looks like on my phone. But it was making me think that a lot of what I've seen over the years in business books is all about leadership, right? Like how to, whether it's principles that you apply or, as I'm always interested in the mindset, but really what you do to kind of inspire and guide people along. And it occurred to me that in the world of IT, that it's really hard to go to the airport and find a book that's basically how you focus on low-level technical things. And by low-level, I don't mean necessarily computational things, but just how do I work with auditors, right? How do I figure out getting through, what are the conversations I have to get people to change the way that they're thinking? And I read a lot of these books. especially over the past 20 years. And I get frustrated by many of them because they stop right short of tactics that you can follow and things that you can do. And, to be self-aggrandizing, a lot of the material that I write, and I'm proving myself wrong by not doing it right now, but a lot of the material I write, the 2 books that I have, I try to go over it like, do this exact thing, right? Here's a very prescriptive tactic to follow. For example, one that's very prescriptive is I always tell people every quarter, that's every 3 months, every quarter, you should have like an internal conference or training session to help spread this new way of doing software. You can see the studio there. Let me move that. I don't want you doing that. But I have this problem with centering myself. I should really do some what do they call that in theater? Blocking. But, one of the ways to spread change in a large organization is to ensure that everyone knows about what you're doing, do some internal marketing, and also do training to get people skilled up, and also build trust that the new way of doing things is good. And I think one of the main tactics I've seen organizations do this is every quarter they have an internal conference. They bring people online, or when you can, you bring people in person, and you have their fellow coworkers come and present on it. You can have people like me come in and talk in broad generalizations and macro stuff or whatever. But anyways, the point of that example is that's a very tactical, specific thing to do. And I guess you could call that leadership, but a lot of what leadership is about, kind of being more inspiring, finding out what the strategy is. But it often doesn't get down to the nitty gritty of like, what do you actually do, right? Like, use this PowerPoint template. I mean, that might actually be kind of interesting. But I think there's a couple of things there. One is like, if you are in a managerial or leadership position, right? Like, don't get really distracted by just the pure sort of leadership-y kind of stuff, and make sure that you're actually seeking out patterns and ways of doing new things, like that internal marketing sort of way. Or, it could be even something as simple as it's quite some time ago now, but initially when I was at Pivotal, now VMware Tanzu, I remember I talked with, I heard the CEO of a major retailer in the U.S. said that at status meetings, in addition to asking for the status of things and how things were going, they started to ask what the team who was working on a new product or a new piece of software to run the business, what that team had learned, right? Tell me something that when you've been going through the cycle of perfecting your product, going through that small batch loop, that I'm always talking about, coming up with a theory of how to improve your software that helps you achieve your business goals, writing that code, getting it into production, observing people using it and see if your theory was validated or not, and going through, again and again until you figure out what's going on to kind of discover and explore the best way to get people to, give you money or to transact your internal business stuff. There are many things you're going to be learning, and you should be documenting and knowing them. So as an executive, you should ask people what those things are first, to just kind of cynically, I guess, if you will, and cynically is the wrong word, but first in a kind of command and control way to ensure they're doing it, to make them show the work. But also it's good to be curious about that yourself. So again, that's a very tactical thing. You're not just giving people autonomy and encouraging innovation and things like that, but here's an actual thing that you can do for that. And I think one of the things you can find, the types of literature and research, literature, I don't think anyone says that anymore, but in the body of work of how to do these things, often the word pattern is used, right? Or cookbook or things like that. And that's a good word to search out for specific things to learn from. Hence my anti-pattern yesterday. Now, also, I think there's a if you remember that Simon Sinek guy, right? And this always ask why, right? Like, go through these levels of why and discover what things are. And, he's got some great TEDx talk about this. And it is like, if you're not doing that, right? As with a lot of this kind of high level businessy talk, even though it may not be tactically useful, like you don't exactly know what to do in your case when you've learned that you should ask why. If you're not doing that, then that's a problem, right? I've found that a lot of business advice is basically kind of like I talked a couple of days ago, that people weren't actually doing anything in the first place. So you really got to go over the basics, right? You got to really start flossing. And if you're not flossing, Let's, before we worry about more complicated things, let's just step back and do that, right? Like, if you're not actually using version control, or you're in the 40 to 60%, depending on, where you look at it, the 40, 60% of organizations that aren't fully doing continuous integration, let's not even worry about deploying your software on a weekly basis or worry about doing this small batch loop where you're doing more of a product-oriented thing. Let's just get version control in place, and let's get continuous integration in place. If you're not doing unit testing, just don't worry about all this other highfalutin stuff. Just start flossing. So I think, I was reading kind of a write-up that my coworker, Derek, was doing of a couple of ways of kind of, just some tactics, if you will. Sort of mid-level tactics from some of our customers. Miranda has spoken frequently in the VMware Tanzu cinematic universe, as it were. And she goes over a part that I think is interesting about why. Is it's good to ask why, but I think once you've discovered the true nature of your organization and the why of what you're doing, and hopefully it's not just, the vacuous return shareholder value, make sure our employees are happy, and return to our community, which is all fine, but you got to move beyond that. She shows how to use whys as a tool. And, there's the 5 whys stuff. This is another great tactic from the lean world. And it's called 5 whys because it says, as a rule of thumb, as a tactic, whenever you encounter some problem, just ask why 5 times. Go 5 layers deep into why you're doing something. And you might need to go deeper, and you might not need to go that deep. But it's a good point of saying, really understand why something exists, why it's happening, what the problem is, what's caused it, why we're doing that. And you can see Miranda going over some of that kind of 5 why sort of theory here, whether it's 5 or not. But she also has it in a very understanding, empathetic way that, like, you need to figure out how to respectfully ask that, right? Like, how to kind of talk with someone in a nice conversational tone and ask them why they're doing something. And I think one of the main things that people encounter, speaking of the technocratic thing over leadership, when they want to improve the way they do software, in order to improve the way their business functions, they want to do the digital transformation. As I talk about frequently, here, let me adjust this. You don't need to see all that space above my head. Wouldn't you rather see the, more of my microphone and my fancy livery here? Anyways, there's a lot of no's that you encounter, right? There's a lot of, this is the way we've always done things. We're going to keep doing them. There's this great thing called Larman's Law. You should definitely look that up if you haven't seen it. But let me write that in the mentions, put it in the show notes here, just so that, let's see. Larman's Laws, 5 whys. See, this way, you can go and look these things up when you want to at the show notes, which are available at kube.io/Tanzu Talk. You can also go to tanzu.tv and kind of find things there, but just go to kube.io/Tanzu Talk for now. And I don't know, that's where I keep things fresher, if you will. But anyhow, so a lot of the things that you encounter when you're trying to change a system is the status quo, right? Like, the system has worked thus far, you're still alive, you're still functioning. And at some point, it was the best way of operating, and that's the way everyone knows how to operate. So they spend a lot of time telling you no. They might have a roundabout way of telling you no, but basically they're not changing, and they're going to stick with what they're doing. And so a lot of what you need to do, especially as a leader, because it's hard for individuals to do this, and it's not only hard but also annoying to have engineers do it, because engineers have a different way of asking why. They generally ask why by saying the way you're doing it is inefficient and not as good as it could be. And therefore, whether they say it explicitly or not, your way of doing things is stupid, and therefore you are being stupid, which is not really what people want to hear, right? That's kind of why I don't like taking my kids to the dentist, because that's the train of thought that the dentist has when they tell me every single time that my kids need to brush better. And I'm just like, yes, thank you. Please send a bill, right? Like, it's the most obvious thing that you could tell someone is that your kids need to be better at brushing their teeth. I'm not really sure what good in the world the dentist thinks that they're doing with that. But boy, they sure do like doing it. Anyhow, so it's good to always figure out a way to ask beyond people saying no about things. And I think that's a tactic that you can spend a lot of time learning actual tactics for, seeing how people do it. But even the idea of one of the primary tactics that as a leader you're going to be following is to question, and even question is overload. You got to be really careful in how you phrase this. Let's be super clever, is to understand why people are doing things the way they are, to understand the process, right? And I would even suggest, if you wanted to be a little Machiavellian, that what you might do is you might ask for the process documentation for things, ask for the justification, the thinking, ask people to show the work of why you're doing something and why you have to do something that way. And I don't know, see how long it takes them to find that, see if they know what it is, see if it even makes sense. But, sort of do a review of why you're doing things the current way, and maybe you'll find that you should keep doing things that way. You might also find that there are higher priority things to solve, like putting testing in place or continuous integration. But I suspect that in most cases, you will find that there is no longer a good reason to keep doing things this old way, or there was never really a reason that anyone knows about, or it's been long forgotten. So, I think, to my mind, that means always be seeking out, even if you think, I just went through an airport or a bookstore, or I looked at books Audible is suggesting to me, and boy, I'm going to crack it this time and understand leadership better and how to do things. Also be seeking out actual technocratic things, actual ways of tactics and things you can use. And for an example, I was looking through the white papers we have, and this was making me think, I need to get a little bit better about reading things that we already have. But, this is a fun one that I think if you were considering, doing your remote and branch office stuff, right, edge computing, there probably is, I should read through this to make sure, but just flipping through it, you can see we have one of our papers that, you could make an excuse that it's too technical and you shouldn't be involved in that. But I think our friend Deming would say that's the business that you're in, right? If that is a problem you need to solve, you should at least be able to withstand reading through 10 or 15 pages and kind of seeing, I guess it's 27, but seeing what the words are and just kind of glancing through it and at least understanding what the layout is. Because eventually, you're going to ask one of the people to get up on a whiteboard and explain what this is to you. So you might as well prep yourself a little bit. And then, of course, I think I've mentioned the chargeback paper that we have, right? That is a very, very technocratic concern, is how you do chargebacks and showbacks. And in this one, you don't really need to go to see how you extract logs and things like that. But the first half of it is a very kind of technocratic thing, kind of going over how you think about what you charge for and kind of think through the process of why you would be doing that. And then finally, in a finance area, we've got some better ones. And there's a talk that one of my coworkers, Dormain, gave at the past Spring One platform I still haven't watched, about putting together a business case. But this is one of those, when it comes to putting together a business case for change, right? And especially a business case for making sure that I continue to be well compensated because you have spent the maximum amount of money that you have available on our software in Tanzu Land, which I always encourage you, the viewer, the listener, whoever, to do. Just take whatever the amount of money you have to spend, just spend it on Tanzu stuff. And eventually it'll trickle down to me, and I appreciate that as far as my continual employment and overall compensation. But, kind of understand what the framework looks like when you put something like the Tanzu stack in place. But, don't hesitate to actually learn that stuff. Because really, I've read all these books, or a lot of them. The lessons of leadership are always the same, whether it's some Navy SEAL telling it to you or someone who revolutionized Chrysler or whatever, right? You're going to kind of see the same things over and over. And a lot of it is going to be much more validation of what you sort of already know. And I find that after reading them, you're kind of left asking all right, so when does this book begin where it teaches me how to do things? Now, that said, that is kind of cynical, but I think there's two books, they're quite old, that I would recommend. And, well, I don't know if they're quite old, but there's a great one called The Halo Effect. And that is just an extended treatment of that rant that I just had about business books. There's another good one I haven't read in a long time called In Search of Stupidity. And that one, the cases in it are kind of old, but it's a good companion to the Halo Effect. And I think if you read through those, there's another one. I'm like the old John Willis there, always recommending homework. And it's called, I think, A CIO in Wolf's Clothing. I should go read this one. It's written by I forget her name, but a Gartner analyst. And it's got tactics. It's all about all of that, all of that happy talk about being a great company that's collaborative and fitting into the world. That's all fantastic. So let's go back to the real world and talk about how to get stuff done and how to advance yourself and your team and your organization to make sure that, one, you're doing well, but two, if you're doing well, if you've got the psychological safety to do your job well, I think as that Google study went over, once you get your own local optimization along psychological safety, you can locally optimize the entire organization. Now, that was some more snarkiness there, but anyhow, those are some books I would actually recommend that are kind of good in the leadership thing. So, there's some other references to things that are in there, but the point is, think about tactics and patterns, and not just leadership, but what you'll actually be doing. Now, speaking of tactics and patterns, I've got two things I want to recommend to you. Maybe this is a little too low level for what you want to do as a leader. I don't know. We'll see. It depends on where you are. I mean, if you're leading IT, right? You're in charge of making decisions about how your infrastructure is going to be managed and run, how you're going to be moving to a container-based world. There are probably several free courses at Kube.academy that you could go to and kind of just get an idea, what the basics of containers are, what the basics of Kubernetes are. You might even be interested in going further into exploring what they are, but they're totally free. And if you just go to kube.academy, that's a real domain name. You can actually get a .academy. There's no .com at the end. But you can go there and get a kind of a basic understanding of what's going on there. And you can always go, as they say, in depth. But it's also good to send out to anyone you might be have in your organization if you're a leader, or if you're one of those people who wants to learn more about it. We got all sorts of topics. We're always adding new ones. Next week, I'm talking to, I forget which course she has done, but I'm talking to someone who's done a couple of these courses, which will be fun to go over. But you should go check that out at kube.academy. Now, when it comes to development, right, that's kind of the operations side. Also, if you go to tanzu.vmware.com/developer, we have all these topics that you can start to dig into. I particularly look forward to the Agile part, where we're starting to add a lot more things about what our Pivotal Labs people do in product. I was supposed to write something, but I'm going to let you in on a public secret. I'm probably not going to get around to it. I should stop promising people. I got to stop volunteering to do things for people because I never get around to it. I think that's probably a personal problem. I should do a 5 whys on that. That would be fun. Get my psychological safety or whatever. So if you want to find those two things, I gave you the links to them there, but you can also just go to kote.io/Tanzu Talk and find the show notes. Now, the next thing I wanted to go over, and then it looks like I'll have gone up to the full hour anyways, despite my best intentions, or 40 minutes, is I was thinking about this morning, I have a dog. She's fine, as I'll get into. Her name is Junebug, which is delightful here in the Netherlands because it's really hard for native Dutch or Netherlands speakers to say the J. So her name is a little weird for some people. But if you don't know, a Junebug's just like, I don't know, a beetle we have back in the States. That's a really stupid beetle. Just flies around a lot, runs into things. It looks like it would be a very plump, tasty snack if you were into eating raw bugs. But June bugs are fun, and there's a ton of them in Texas. I think we're just exiting June bug season, but they'll just be dead ones everywhere. They're just like low-rent cicadas, basically. But we named our dog that, and my dog really annoys me. And oftentimes I think I dislike my dog, and I don't want her around. But I've been realizing recently that I like the dog perfectly fine. Right? There's no problem with the dog. I enjoy her company, and she really likes me. Everyone likes her. But what I really dislike is all the extra work, the responsibility that comes with the dog, right? Like you gotta feed the dog, which is not so bad. You should walk the dog. You got to make sure that the dog is doing well. The dog's got to do this. You got to groom the dog. All these things. When someone comes to drop off a package and the baby's asleep, the dog barks and wakes up the baby, and then you got to worry about that, and on and on and on, right? So it's really not so much the dog that I dislike. I mean, sometimes her behavior is annoying, right? Like She pulls a lot when you walk her, which makes me not want to walk her, which makes me not want to train her, which makes her pull more, and this situation perpetuates. But what I dislike is all the extra work that comes with the dog, right? And there's this what some people have jokingly called the Merlin podcasting universe. So there's this guy Merlin Mann who has a bunch of podcasts. He's the inbox zero person, if you know that concept. He sort of explained that as a concept, which is, as he says a lot nowadays, is a much different concept than people think it is. Anyhow, he uses this, I forget where he cites it from, but this idea of, you always have to get pets for your pets, or hobbies for your hobbies, or gadgets for your gadgets. And I think a dog is something like that, right? Like when you get a dog, adults often think of this, and I feel like, my dad was like this. I feel like it's always a grumpy parent who's like this, is they point out to the kids that if we get this pet, we're going to have to take care of it, right? Like we're going to have to get a fish tank, you got to feed it. And the kids are always like, oh, we'll do that. And then, it's always the grumpy parent who ends up doing it. Hence the pre-grumpitude that the parent has. So, it's always good to know the maintenance, if you will, the extra work that comes from making a decision. Now, I think that's a truism, but I think also what I want, the other thing to be aware of is kind of what I was walking through, is like, it takes a lot of effort and a lot of reminding myself that it's not the dog that I dislike. It's the extra work that comes with it, right? And I think if you're thinking about how you're changing and running your organization, how you're doing your digital transformation, it's good to think about and be aware of, if you dislike a process that you're going through, or you're consternating a lot, make sure you can separate out all the extra stuff that comes with that original thing that you wanted, that thing that you're hating, and, separate those things out and see if you can solve those problems separately, right? And, there's also a positive way of looking at that in order to enjoy your dog, if you will, in order to have a maximal good time of it, you also have to figure out how to enjoy the maintenance work that comes with it, right? Like these are two parts of it, right? So all of that extra work that goes into putting that small batch loop in place, improving how you do software so you can start to be more agile and nimble in the way you do your business. There's a lot of extra work that's going to come with that to enable that. And you should be aware of that, and to some extent also happy about it, and also spend a tremendous amount of time automating as much of it as possible, and making sure that you don't get consumed by all of that stuff, and instead can focus on the quality and your enjoyment of the dog, not all of the drudgery work that comes with it. Now, I would like to suggest to you that when it comes to software, if you looked into the VMware Tanzu stack, that's the way to go. It's going to make sure that you focus on the dog and not all the annoying stuff that you have to do to maintain the dog, right? Like as over the past, let's say 6 years, if depending on how you start counting, but if you look at the case studies of our customers, they'll talk a lot about the CF push experience, the Cloud Foundry push experience. So a lot of work that we in the industry have done has gone into making it so that you have a platform as a service that runs atop the infrastructure, and your developers don't have to worry about all of that maintenance stuff, and they can just focus on working on their software, on moving pixels on the screen. And it's not only like just self-service stuff for their infrastructure, but also working with auditors, making sure it's secure, making sure that they can get that DevOps stream of being autonomous and doing that. And it's really worth your time to look into the VMware Tanzu stack. Now, you might be wondering, but Cote, how do I get started? That all sounds great. Your metaphors are a little wacky and coming a little too fast for me to make much sense of. But I enjoy the intriguingness of what you're saying. How could I discover more? Well, listen, whether it's an hour or longer, half a day or a day, we do a lot of workshops for free, what we call a discovery workshop. Now, if you go to kube.academy, there's a link where you can sign up for software development office hours. You can just kind of fill this out, and we'll help you kind of sort through, like, what issues are you solving? Is this something we can help you with? I think, what I like about our process is that it really focuses on, like, but what problem do you have, right? And let's make sure that you have a problem that we can help you solve and that we can address, and that you understand what that problem is and we understand what that problem is, right? We don't want you to just gratuitously, like, just, replace all your VMs with containers and set up a big Kubernetes instance and get to, as I like to call it, the blinking cursor. And now we've got this great internal cloud that we built. And then, as happens in many, many cases, and many large organizations I've talked to who go down this route, mysteriously people aren't using it. We had this platonic idea that if we show people the truth and the awesomeness, we show them the way, as they say, because they will have this platonic Aristotelian realization that it's truth, and therefore they will comply with its awesomeness. That's very rarely the case. And you do indeed need to start with the why, with what you're doing things. And we bake a lot of that into the process to make sure that, that you get something valuable and, continue to work with us and be customers and make sure that I, am happy because I have that trickle-down compensation from your happiness is my happiness, as it were. So, with that, that's our topics today. As always, as I've mentioned several times, if you want to find links to those books that I mentioned and other things like that, you can go to kote.io/Tanzu Talk. And I'll be back tomorrow, sometime between 11:15 or so, Amsterdam time. And I've got a couple of interviews and guests lined up, at least 2 at the moment, to go over. And those should be fun as well. So with that, we'll see everyone next time. Bye-bye.